Next is Lexi from NHS Wales. Lovely.
There we are.
So thank you for coming today.
Thank you for inviting me.
To speak about a toolkit for supporting people living with dementia in care homes to prevent malnutrition. Something that we really need to listen hard to, I think. So over to you. Off you go.
Thank you very much. I'll try sharing my screen. So hello everybody, my name is Lexi. I'm the clinical lead dietitian for the Dementia Wellbeing Community Team based in Hywel Dda University Health Board, which is down in West Wales. You can also find me, I'm the dementia dietitian on Instagram. So I'm going to talk to you for the next sort of 20 minutes about a toolkit for supporting people living with dementia in care homes to try and prevent malnutrition. So during my talk this morning, I'm going to talk about that there isn't a one-size-fits-all to preventing malnutrition for people living with dementia in care homes, because as the lovely Tom Kitwood quote says, once you've met one person with dementia, you've met one person with dementia, and that extends not only to how they choose to live their life and their personalities, but also in relation to what they enjoy eating and drinking and their nutritional care. So I'm going to talk about how we can try and put the person at the centre of their nutritional care and some of the simple practical changes that we can do that can help to support with that as well. So first up, I want to talk about some of the changes that we could possibly make to the environment that can make it easier for people living with dementia to eat and drink in meal times and enjoy the mealtime experience, because what we need to think about is that enjoyment, trying to make sure that it doesn't just become a task based exercise. Perhaps we start to feel a little bit anxious, you know, if we've screened and we're identified somebody's becoming at risk of malnutrition, or perhaps we've simply just noticed that the person's eating and drinking less, then understandably, you know, there's this focus then on we need to try and get them to eat and drink a bit more. What can we do? And sometimes that can increase sort of the feelings of stress or anxiety and make that mealtime become a little bit more, you know, task focused, and maybe we over prompt, over encourage, and actually that makes the mealtime less enjoyable, less relaxed, and actually that can be quite counterproductive in terms of increasing a person's diet and fluid intake. So some other simple things from a practical point of view to look out for is lighting. Is where that person's eating and drinking and having their meals, is the dining environment well lit? In an ideal world, we want it to be natural lighting, just because that makes it easier for somebody to be able to see what's in front of them and orientate themselves. But if we do need artificial lighting, which is probably the case very much this time of year when the days are getting shorter and tend to be gloomier unless it's a gloriously sunny day outside, then if we do use artificial lighting, then trying to make sure it doesn't create shadows that can make it, again, a little bit more difficult for somebody to see the meal in front of them, or even just to orientate themselves to know that they're in the dining room, it's time for a meal time, you know, there's cutlery and food in front of them. Does the environment itself provide those visual and sensory cues that it's mealtime and it's time to eat? So this could be things like making sure the meal is set appropriate for that mealtime. So is the cutlery appropriate for either like a lunchtime meal or a breakfast meal? Are there condiments on the table that would indicate that it's breakfast time or lunchtime or supper time? Are there pleasant cooking smells about the place? Because again, if you think about it, when we're cooking or when we're having meals, or even if we go out for food, there tends to be those nice cooking smells, which again kind of picks our interest, gets our saliva glands producing more saliva, maybe it makes our tummy rumble, those sorts of things. Not, you know, the mental stimulation, but also the physical cues that it's going to be time to eat, stimulates our appetite, and mentally and physically gets us ready for that meal time. Is there a menu displayed? Can we, you know, use that menu to drive some conversation about, you know, what's for lunch, what we're having, maybe do a little bit of reminiscence about perhaps when they've had that kind of meal before, what sort of foods they enjoy, you know, what they're looking forward to. You know, are they looking forward to, perhaps it's, I don't know, chicken dinner and then apple crumble and custard for pudding? You know, are they looking forward to the chicken dinner, or are they, you know, going to get through the chicken dinner, but actually they're really looking forward to the apple crumble and custard afterwards because it's one of their favourite puddings? Have we minimised distractions? Have we turned the TV off? Have we turned music down or turn the music off. When it comes to music at mealtimes and people living with dementia in care homes, there seems to be some sort of like conflicting evidence. Some research seems to suggest that it can be helpful and it can be beneficial, because again, it can promote that calm, inclusive, enjoyable environment. And then other studies have found that actually it can be a bit of a distraction. But again, this is probably due to sort of personal preferences and knowing the people that you're supporting and who are living in your care home environment, and whether it's likely to be supportive to play music during a mealtime, or whether actually it could be quite distracting. And so it's better just to have, you know, the general sounds that normally accompany a mealtime, and chatting and clink of plates and cutlery and those sorts of things. Trying to avoid doing medication rounds during mealtime, because again, this is going to provide an extra distraction, which for somebody living with dementia who might need to concentrate quite a lot on the meal in front of them, then that can just be an extra distraction. In relation to seating arrangements, does the person have a preferred place to sit? Are there people that they particularly enjoy sitting and having their meal times with, because they enjoy interacting with them? That could be, fellow residents, it could be staff, it could be a mixture of both. Or is it somebody that actually prefers to eat alone? Perhaps they're a little bit self-conscious about their eating habits and how they manage to eat independently. Or perhaps it was somebody that had lived on their own for a period of time before moving into a care home, so they got quite used to sitting and eating on their own. So they don't really enjoy sitting at a table with a large group of people. They'd rather sit quietly in front of the TV, or sit more quietly on their own and concentrate and enjoy their meal rather than being surrounded by lots of people. And also, if we think about a typical sort of care home environment and a dining room environment, there quite often will be lots of people within that dining room, and for many people they might be unfamiliar. They might not recognize that it's somebody that they live with now. So again, it's thinking about how you might feel if you were having a meal time with people that you consider to be strangers or unfamiliar, whether that's likely to increase your appetite and intake, and you'd enjoy that kind of social interaction and the hub and the buzz of a dining room, or whether actually it might make you feel sort of anxious or uncomfortable, and so you're going to eat and drink a little bit less, and perhaps how we can provide a little bit of reassurance, or what we can do to change that environment, so that for most people within that environment, it's an environment that they can enjoy their food, they can concentrate on their food, they can eat and drink well within that environment. But again, taking into account that there'll be a wide range of people, so you can't get that environment perfect for everybody, but what sort of things can we do so that for most people it's as supportive and promoting a good appetite and intake. And then again, thinking about that social interaction and the support that we might need to be providing, and the seating arrangements. Is there plenty of space that we can sit beside that person, provide that social interaction, as well as perhaps the physical assistance with eating and drinking? And are we just providing the right amount of support, trying to provide the minimum amount of support so that somebody can eat and drink as independently as possible? Because probably unsurprisingly, evidence suggests that if somebody can eat and drink independently, they eat and drink better rather than needing that assistance. So is it somebody that we just need to cut the food up for them? Is it somebody that we just need to start off give them that initial spoonful? Is it somebody that would be better with finger foods? What sort of support can we provide that will maintain their independence for as long as possible?
Not have another one.
So next in our toolkit, thinking about what do we know about that person that we're supporting. Again, if we think about ourselves, we all have different likes, dislikes, routines in relation to food and drink. These have often been shaped over the course of our lifetime, and they may not have changed now that we're living with dementia or have moved into a care home. So in fact, perhaps some of the routines and food and drinks that are familiar to us might actually provide a source of comfort and reassurance in an environment that quite often maybe feels strange. Perhaps our eating habits and what we like to eat and drink fitted around our shift patterns, or when we worked, the sort of job that we had. For example, if we were a long distance lorry driver, perhaps we were used to eating more sort of convenience food, and sandwiches and things like that we still enjoy and still prefer now. And again, thinking about are we somebody that lives to eat or eats to live? Because again, this is going to change how we feel about food, what sort of food we enjoy, when we enjoy eating it, and yeah, whether we enjoy sitting in company and eating, or again, whether we kind of prefer to just grab something on the go and eat it because we're aware we need to eat to, keep healthy and well, but actually we don't get that much enjoyment out of food and eating and drinking. Perhaps somebody's living with other health conditions that have made them change their eating habits or amend their eating habits. So thinking about things like perhaps diabetes, where they've reduced the number of high sugar snacks, or perhaps their portions of carbohydrates that we need to be aware of. Perhaps it's somebody that also has a diagnosis of irritable bowel syndrome or gallstones, or experiences acid reflux. So again, there's certain foods that they avoid that they know can trigger symptoms, so they avoid these. And if we're not aware of that, and perhaps providing a food or the type of diet that causes them to have these sorts of issues, but they're not able to communicate that, perhaps because of the symptoms related to their dementia, then again, they might not be eating and drinking very well. And we need to, do a little bit of investigation and find out why that is. It might not be because it's directly linked to their symptom of dementia. It's more about the fact that it's foods that they've never previously eaten. Again, thinking about beliefs about food. Is somebody vegetarian or vegan? Have they avoided certain foods for other like cultural beliefs or religious beliefs? Or again, just is it somebody that's always enjoyed having a really healthy, balanced diet and stuck to certain foods and enjoyed certain foods? Is that's what's made them sort of feel well and has been good and beneficial for their physical and mental well-being. The other thing then just to think about is taste changes. So quite often as we get older, we lose a lot of our taste buds and taste sensations. Sweet tends to be the last one that we lose. So perhaps foods that people have previously enjoyed have now started to taste quite bland. So we need to think about adding stronger tastes and flavours, or perhaps trying different foods that previously they haven't tried or enjoyed as much, but now because they still taste nice and strong and tasty, I suppose, that person would enjoy, and they would eat a little bit more rather than bland tasting food, because probably for most of us we wouldn't particularly enjoy eating large amounts of food that tastes bland or doesn't kind of give us that sensory feedback that we're after, or even maybe expecting. Perhaps some foods that we've previously enjoyed and have been really tasty, but now we're experiencing taste changes. Perhaps they don't taste that nice anymore. Perhaps they taste quite bitter. Or in some cases, perhaps even taste off, that we think, oh, actually, that's not what I'm expecting. That's not, that doesn't taste nice. I don't want to eat any more of that. So the more we know about a person, all those things, then the better we can meet their nutritional needs, or try and meet their nutritional needs, and provide foods and drinks that they enjoy, feel comfortable eating and drinking, and then hopefully that will also help maintain a good appetite and intake. So it's important that once you found out all this information, that you document it and you use it, and it's shared with everybody that's supporting that person with their nutritional care. So about sort of halfway through my talk, so I thought I would give you a little bit of scenario, or imagine. I know you've already had a chock-a-block morning this morning with other talks, so just imagine it's got to that stage of the day that you've popped out, you've met your friend in your favourite cafe because they do the best cakes and you love their coffee. A waitress that you don't recognise approaches your table. So you say, oh, I'll have a coffee and my friend will have a cup of tea, please. And you ask them what cakes they have on today, because they have different speciality cakes every day, and they're always equally good, but you want to see what the special cake is today. So the waitress smiles, she's very pleasant, and says, really sorry, but you can't have cake and coffee at the moment, but you can have it in 45 minutes. So you think, oh, okay, well, maybe the cakes aren't ready. Maybe they're cooling, or they haven't iced them, or whatever it might be. So you say, that's fine. I'll just have a cup of coffee, and my friend will have a cup of tea. And then, when the cakes are ready, we'll have another cup of coffee and a cup of tea, and we'll have a piece of cake when it's ready. So this time the waitress doesn't answer, but again, she just walks away smiling. And 10 minutes later, there's still no sign of your drinks or cake, or the waitress for that matter, coming back to see and to give you any more information. I just want you to take a minute to think how that would make you feel. Would you feel happy? Would you feel sad? Would you feel disappointed? Would you feel quite cross? What might you do? What might you say? Are you likely to sit there much longer, or would you get up and leave? Would you be likely to go back to that cafe? And when we the reason for this scenario, given this scenario, is it's something that I actually witnessed when I went out to a care home a little while ago, in that there were two ladies sat around a table in the dining room. They hadn't long finished their breakfast, but they asked the carer for a drink and a biscuit, and the carer said to them that the tea trolley would be round at 10:30. At this point, it was about 10:15. They clearly, in their reality, they were in a cafe, they were waiting for a cup of coffee, or, you know, they were waiting for a drink, but they were told that they'd have to wait for 45 minutes. So it's just thinking about that, you know, in our, if that happened in our day, how that would make us feel, and how it would make you feel for the rest of the day. Chances are you would feel disappointed, you might feel upset, you might feel that for a prolonged period of the day, and somebody living with dementia, they might not remember why they feel a little bit sad or a little bit disappointed or a little bit unsettled later in the day, but it could be because they've had this experience earlier in the day, and it might have that knock-on effect for the rest of the day, that they feel a little bit out of sorts, and so perhaps their, you know, the diet and fluid intake for the rest of the day isn't brilliant. So in that case, not only have we missed the opportunity when they really wanted a cup of tea and something to eat at the same time, to give them something to eat and drink to help make sure they meet their nutritional needs, perhaps we've also sort of impacted on what and how they feel and what they might eat and drink for the rest of the day. So in addition to thinking about, you know, knowing that person and their life story, also thinking about what's that person's reality at the moment. Are they, you know, with their diagnosis of dementia, have they gone to a different era of their life? Perhaps they're back in their working life. So again, they're expecting food and drink to fit around their working pattern or feel like they should be in work. Are they expecting their partner or children to have to come home to have food with them, so they don't want to eat and drink until, you know, their partner or their family are home, because that's their usual routine and that's what they're expecting. Where do they think they're currently living? Are they orientated to the fact that they're now living in a care home, or are they actually made sense of the world around them by feeling like they're on a lovely holiday in a hotel? Or I had a lovely example of a couple that felt that they were on a cruise, that they lived together in this care home, but actually their reality was that they were on a cruise. And it did actually impact on kind of how they thought the food should be presented when they had their meals and who they wanted to sit with. They didn't want other people sitting on their table because they were on their lovely cruise holiday, just the two of them. So they wanted just to sit, the two of them. So if we can find out how people are feeling, and is it, you know, perhaps they're not eating and drinking as much as they need to be, or as much as we know we'd like them to be, how can we make changes to align to their current reality? Can we make practical changes, or is it within the constraints of the care home routine or the care home environment, it's quite difficult to make those changes that would completely align to their current reality? And if we can't do that, how can we maybe go about validate how they're feeling, so that they're more likely to eat and drink a little bit more, or and meet their nutritional needs? So just a little bit more about how people are feeling. We know that for lots of people living with dementia, communication can be difficult or can become more difficult as they move through their journey of living with dementia. So somebody might not be able to easily communicate how they're feeling. So again, we need to do that little bit of investigation and think about, has somebody eating and drinking less because of how they're feeling? Are they experiencing an illness? Is it a physical health thing that's changed? Perhaps they're feeling unwell. And again, if we think about ourselves, quite often when we're not feeling very well, we don't necessarily feel like eating and drinking huge amounts. Are they in pain? Again, we know when we're experiencing pain, most of the time, again, we don't feel like eating and drinking lots. Are they just experiencing feelings of anxiety, low mood, sadness, especially perhaps if they've recently moved into the care home? You know, they've experienced quite a lot of changes, or perhaps feelings of loss and uncertainty. And is it linked to this? And how can we help that person to feel more settled, feel more comfortable, feel more at home? As again, for some people, perhaps when they're feeling anxious or low in mood or sad, they will eat and drink a little bit more. But for lots of people, they will eat and drink less. And perhaps even for the people that do eat and drink a little bit more, generally people don't tend to fancy eating sort of big, you know, cooked dinners or perhaps balanced meals. It's more those sort of comfort foods that people might prefer to eat. So things like your cakes or your biscuits, or again, those kind of maybe higher calorie, higher fat foods that kind of bring us comfort that we tend to turn to when we're feeling anxious. So again, it's trying to do that little bit of investigation, look a little bit further, look a little bit deeper. Is a change in somebody's appetite maybe not linked to their diagnosis of dementia and a progression of the dementia and symptoms directly related to that? Is it linked to either a change in their physical health that they're unable to communicate, or is it a change in sort of how they're feeling from a mental health and a well-being point of view? And those are the sorts of changes that we need to make, rather than the food and drink that we're providing. Do we need to make changes, like I said, to make somebody feel more comfortable or less anxious, or not be experiencing sort of pain and illness? So the last thing that I wanted to talk about was some of the practical food and fluid changes that we can make. So if we know the person really well, we've looked at their life story, we know what they usually like to eat and drink, when they like to eat and drink, portion sizes, who they like to eat and drink it with. We've made the environment as conducive to eating and drinking well as possible. We've ruled out any other sort of changes or possible causes for why somebody might be eating and drinking less. What sort of things can we do with the food and drink that we're providing that might make sure that somebody doesn't experience malnutrition, or doesn't start to experience weight loss? So it's those things like those small and frequent nutrient-dense meals and snacks, because maybe if somebody's less mobile, less active, their appetite gets a little bit smaller. So if we put a big plate of food in front of them, they might feel quite overwhelmed, not feel like eating and drinking all of it. So smaller and more frequent meals and snacks might be easier for somebody to manage. As I mentioned earlier, things like finger foods. So not only maybe if somebody's finding cutlery difficult to use, but perhaps they find it difficult to settle for any prolonged period of time at a meal time, finger foods are great for maintaining independence, or for somebody being able to eat whilst they're mobilizing and eating and drinking on the go. If somebody maybe drinks a little bit better than they eat, those nourishing homemade milkshakes or milky drinks can be another way of not only providing fluid, but also providing a little bit of extra nutrition. And again, that's quite nice this time of year with the dark nights and the colder evenings, that perhaps it's something that they would have done previously. So not just a milkshake, but something like a hot chocolate or a Horlicks or an Ovaltine before bed can not only provide a little bit of comfort or reassurance or be part of what was typically their routine, but again would be a way of providing a little bit of extra nutrition. Again, thinking about somebody's current reality, do we need to be able to provide food during the night, but perhaps their day and night time have shifted, so they're sleeping a little bit more in the day and awake at night, or they've gone back into that kind of shift pattern of when they're awake and when they want to eat and drink. Using adapted cutlery again to help maintain independence, and just thinking about those taste changes. Can we add sweet flavors to savory meals? So things like cranberry sauce or apple sauces, honey over roasted vegetables, perhaps sweeter tasting vegetables that again would add some sweet flavors, but would form more of a more balanced meal, rather than just relying on things like cakes or biscuits or those other sweet foods that somebody might prefer, puddings that somebody else might prefer. In relation to practical things and menu planning, the British Dietetic Association have produced a really useful document called the Care Home Digest, which was launched back in June this year and is available to download from their website. So if you wanted a bit more information or wanted some extra ideas, then that's definitely a really, really useful resource that you can go and have a look for, like I said, sort of menu planning, nourishing snacks, nourishing drinks. It also contains some information about some of the environmental changes and food provision and those social interactions and social support around meal times. So just in summary, there isn't a one-size-fits-all to improving nutritional intake, and the reason I called my talk a toolkit is that for somebody living with dementia, like all of us, some days we have days where we fancy certain foods or our appetite is really good, and other days it might not be so good. The extra sometimes complicating factor with somebody living with dementia is if they're experiencing those communication difficulties, it can be hard for them to describe or express that's why they're not eating and drinking. So the idea around the toolkit is that there's ideas that you can try and things that you can try, and some days that'll work and other days it won't work. But just because something hasn't worked one day, it doesn't mean it's not worth trying on a different day, or just because something works for several days, it doesn't mean that will be the answer forever and a day. It's about knowing that person and being aware and being able to pick up on those subtle cues and signs that perhaps something's changed, either from a physical health point of view or a sort of mental health and well-being point of view. as well as perhaps, you know, a progression or a change in their dementia and the symptoms that they're now experiencing related to that. So the key things are knowing the person you're caring for, ruling out a physical health cause or change, and again, trying to make sure that the mealtime doesn't become too much of just a task force exercise, that we keep it enjoyable and provide that social interaction, which again can help the better that we know that person. And that's it. So I'll stop sharing, and then if anybody's got any questions, then yeah, feel free to shout.
Thank you, Lexi. That was brilliant. I'm sorry if I disturbed you when
No, it's fine.
I was ordering my coffee.
No, that's okay. It's important. You don't want to become dehydrated in
Especially not this week.
No, be very ironic, Leslie, if you became dehydrated in Malnutrition Awareness Week.
Thank you for that. I think that was really interesting. There's a lot of good ideas there. And I really like it when we talk about reality, because sometimes we forget, don't we, how important that is.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you. So
That's
if
okay.
people are watching this afterwards, it's okay if they send you an email if they've got any questions?
Absolutely, yeah. Would welcome any sort of communication if they want a bit more information, or have got anything else that they want to ask them, but please do get in touch.
Thank you very much. That was
Thank
great.
you.